The recorded video on Zara's phone showed everything. Flight 1482 attendant Victoria Winters screaming at them to go back to where you people came from, while other passengers sat frozen in shock. Zara's hand trembled as she dialed the number her brother Marcus had given her. Thompson & Williams Law Firm, a calm voice answered. Little did she know that this single call would not only challenge SkyWest Airlines' entire corporate structure, but would expose a nationwide network of discrimination that went far beyond one hateful flight attendant's outburst. Could a simple plane ride really uncover America's hidden system of racial injustice? Before we begin this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe in fighting for justice and equality, hit that like and subscribe button too. Stay updated on more eye-opening true stories like this one. It was supposed to be a somber journey. Zara Johnson clutched her first-class ticket tightly as she and her brother Marcus navigated the crowded terminals of Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The holiday season buzz around them felt jarringly disconnected from their grief. Grandmother Elaine, the family matriarch who had raised them after their parents' car accident, had passed away suddenly in Atlanta. Now they were rushing to say their final goodbyes. Flight 1382 to Atlanta now, boarding first class and priority passengers. The announcement crackled overhead. Zara, a successful marketing executive at 30, led the way while Marcus, 2 years younger and exhausted from a 36-hour shift at Chicago Memorial Hospital, where he worked as a medical resident, followed closely behind. "Tickets and ID, please," the gate agent said, her eyes narrowing slightly as they approached. She scrutinized their documents far longer than the white businessman who had passed through moments before. "Are you sure you're at the correct gate?" she asked, despite their boarding passes clearly displaying the flight information. "Yes, we're in first class, seats 3A and 3B, Marcus replied politely, fatigue evident in his voice. The gate agent frowned. "Let me double-check that." She verified their information again, making them wait while other passengers moved past. "It's unusual to see..." She caught herself. "I mean, these seats are premium pricing." "We're aware of the cost," Zara said firmly. "We purchased them, specifically because we need to arrive quickly for a family funeral." Finally allowed to board, they made their way down the jetway only to be stopped again at the aircraft door by flight attendant Victoria Winters, a tall woman with artificially brightened blonde hair and a smile that disappeared the moment she saw them. "First class is to the left," Victoria said coldly, blocking their path despite their clear direction toward the correct cabin. "Yes, we know. Seats 3A and 3B, Marcus explained, showing their boarding passes again. Victoria took the passes, examining them with obvious suspicion. "These were upgraded recently?" "No, we purchased them directly," Zara replied, maintaining her composure despite the implicit suggestion they couldn't afford such tickets. Once seated in the plush first-class cabin, Zara and Marcus tried to settle in, both silently acknowledging the treatment, but choosing to focus on their grief instead of making a scene. Their grandmother would have wanted dignity, not conflict. "Water, please," Marcus requested when Victoria passed by to offer pre-flight beverages to other first-class passengers while conspicuously skipping their row. Victoria's head snapped toward him. "You'll have to wait until the service begins," she said loudly enough for others to hear. "Some passengers are being quite demanding today, unlike our regular customers." The elderly white woman in seat 2C turned slightly, her eyes meeting Zara's with quiet understanding and sympathy. It was a small gesture, but it confirmed what the siblings already knew. Their treatment was noticeably different. As the flight reached cruising altitude, Marcus opened his laptop, hoping to review his critical research presentation scheduled just days after the funeral. His fellowship on cardiovascular disease disparities in minority communities represented years of work, with this presentation potentially securing his specialized residency position. Victoria walked by, carrying a tray of hot coffee for the first-class cabin. As she reached their row, she stumbled slightly, though neither sibling had seen any turbulence or obstacle, and the scalding coffee cascaded directly onto Marcus's keyboard. "Oh!" Victoria exclaimed with exaggerated surprise. "What an unfortunate accident!" Marcus leaped up as the liquid seeped into his computer, the screen flickering before going dark. 3 years of research data, his presentation, patient records, all potentially lost. "My laptop," he gasped, frantically trying to save the device. "You should be more careful about where you place your things in a moving aircraft," Victoria said with a thin smile. "Perhaps economy would have more space for your situation." Zara watched her brother's face tighten with controlled anger and disbelief. This was no accident. It was their first taste of how bad this flight would become, but far from the last. Have you ever experienced that moment when you realize someone's actions towards you aren't just rudeness, but something far more insidious? The moment when discrimination stares you directly in the face? If you felt that sickening realization, comment number 1 below. If you believe airlines should have zero tolerance for discriminatory treatment, hit that like button right now. And if you want to see more stories of people fighting back against systemic racism, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Now, what would you do if you were in Zara and Marcus's situation? Would you stay silent or stand your ground? After the coffee accident, Victoria made a show of assigning another flight attendant, James, to their section. "I'll handle the rest of first class, James. You take care of them," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. Despite this supposed handoff, Victoria continued patrolling past their seats frequently, making comments just loud enough for them to hear. "Standards really have changed around here," she muttered on one pass. Zara, recognizing what was happening, discreetly took out her phone and began recording their interactions. Years of marketing work had taught her the value of documentation, and something told her they would need evidence of this treatment. Across the aisle, a business traveler in an expensive suit, his name badge reading Richard Wong, Chief Technology Officer, began watching the interactions with increasing concern. He caught Zara's eye and gave a subtle nod, silently acknowledging what he was witnessing. Midway through the flight, Victoria returned to their section, surveying the cabin with exaggerated authority. "Sir," she addressed Marcus sharply, "we need to redistribute weight on the aircraft. I'll need you to move to seat 12F in economy." Marcus frowned. "There's no weight distribution issue requiring passenger relocation on a flight that's already cruising. That's against airline safety protocols." Victoria's smile tightened. "Are you questioning my authority on aircraft safety?" "I'm simply stating airline policy," Marcus replied calmly. "Passengers shouldn't be relocated mid-flight without a security reason." "Well, look who knows airline regulations," Victoria said sarcastically. "Perhaps you'd like to explain that to the air marshal when we land and discuss your non-compliance?" Other passengers were now openly watching the exchange. A woman 2 rows ahead turned around, not bothering to hide her interest in the unfolding scene. "I'm not being non-compliant," Marcus maintained his professional tone. "I'm staying in my assigned seat as per my boarding pass and FAA regulations." Victoria leaned closer, dropping her voice. "Listen, I can make the rest of this flight very uncomfortable for you and your sister. At our connecting airport, I have friends in security who won't appreciate your attitude." Zara kept recording, her phone partially concealed by her purse. The business traveler across the aisle cleared his throat. "Excuse me," Richard Wong interjected politely. "I couldn't help overhearing. Perhaps there's been some misunderstanding about the seating arrangements?" Victoria straightened immediately, her demeanor transforming. "Not at all, sir. Just a routine aircraft management issue." "Interesting," he replied. "I've flown over 2 million miles and have never seen a weight redistribution request during cruise altitude." Victoria's eyes narrowed momentarily before she plastered on a smile. "Well, I should check on the other passengers. We'll revisit this matter shortly." As she walked away, several nearby passengers glanced at Marcus and Zara with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Just when they thought they might have a reprieve, Victoria returned with the lead flight attendant, pointing at them from the galley. After a brief conference, she approached their seats again, this time with exaggerated formality. "May I see your boarding passes again?" she demanded loudly. Zara pulled them from her bag. "This is the 3rd time our tickets have been checked." Victoria examined them theatrically. "These seats are for first-class passengers only. How did you end up here?" Because we purchased first-class tickets, Marcus replied evenly. Did someone upgrade you? Are you using someone else's frequent flyer benefits? No, Zara said firmly. We purchased these tickets ourselves, as we've explained multiple times. Victoria raised her voice to be heard throughout the cabin. Well, there seems to be some confusion about how you two ended up in my first-class cabin. The emphasis on my and the implication was crystal clear to everyone listening. The elderly woman in 2C turned around fully now. Young lady, she addressed Victoria firmly. I've been watching this entire situation unfold, and I find your conduct absolutely shameful. Victoria's face flushed red as she realized she was losing control of the narrative. How would she respond to being called out so publicly? And what would happen when they reached their connecting flight? The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had become unmistakably tense. Other passengers were either openly watching or deliberately avoiding eye contact, creating that peculiar silence that falls when everyone is listening while pretending not. To Marcus, who had maintained remarkable composure until now, finally addressed the situation directly. "Excuse me," he called to Victoria as she passed their row again. His voice was calm, but carried a note of authority that came from years of handling high-pressure situations in the emergency room. "May I ask why you've singled us out for repeated ticket verification and attempted seat reassignment?" Victoria froze, then slowly turned toward him. "I'm simply doing my job." "Your job involves repeatedly questioning our presence here despite confirming our tickets 3 times?" Marcus asked. "Or spilling coffee on my computer? Or threatening us with security at the connecting airport?" Victoria's face hardened. "I don't appreciate your tone or these accusations. I'm simply asking for professional service the same as provided to other passengers in this cabin," Marcus replied. Without responding, Victoria marched to the front of the cabin. Moments later, her voice came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we remind all passengers that flight attendant instructions must be followed for safety purposes. We ask that disruptive passengers in seats 3A and 3B please cooperate with crew members for the remainder of the flight." The public shaming attempt hung in the air. Zara felt her cheeks burn with humiliation as several passengers turned to look at them. Then, unexpectedly, Richard Wong unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. "Excuse me," he said loudly enough for the entire cabin to hear. "As a passenger seated next to these individuals for the past 2 hours, I can attest they have been nothing but courteous and patient despite receiving what appears to be targeted harassment." Victoria rushed back from the galley. "Sir, you need to return to your seat immediately." "I will," he replied calmly. "But first I want it noted that I've witnessed discriminatory treatment toward these passengers since boarding." Victoria's professional mask slipped entirely. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she hissed. Then, glaring directly at Marcus and Zara, she uttered the words that would change everything. "These people need to go back to where they came from, instead of causing problems for normal passengers." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Zara's phone was still recording, capturing every word. "Excuse me?" Zara said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "What exactly do you mean by these people?" Victoria realized her mistake too late. She attempted recovery by grabbing the beverage cart and aggressively pushing it down the aisle, deliberately ramming it into Zara's shoulder as she passed. "Ow!" Zara exclaimed, rubbing her arm. "You should keep your arms inside your seat area," Victoria said coldly. Marcus took a deep breath, his medical training kicking in as he maintained his composure while checking his sister's shoulder. Years of facing subtle racism in medical settings had taught him that losing control would only worsen the situation. "Are you okay?" he asked Zara quietly. She nodded, still recording. Around them, several passengers had their phones out now too, documenting the escalating situation. The flight attendant call button chimed repeatedly as concerned passengers sought intervention. Instead of the lead flight attendant, the co-pilot emerged from the cockpit, his expression serious as he surveyed the cabin. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, standing beside Victoria. Before either Marcus or Zara could explain, Victoria jumped in. "These passengers have been combative and uncooperative throughout the flight, refusing seat reassignments and challenging crew authority. Marcus began to speak. "Sir, we have video evidence of—" "I don't need to see videos," the co-pilot interrupted. "FAA regulations are clear that crew instructions must be followed without question during flight." Richard Wong stood again. "Captain, with all due respect, I've witnessed this flight attendant make explicitly racist comments and physically assault a passenger with the beverage cart." The co-pilot glanced at Victoria, who feigned a look of wounded innocence. "I'm sure. There's been a misunderstanding," he said dismissively. "But for everyone's comfort and safety, I'll need you two," he pointed at Marcus and Zara, "to minimize interaction with the crew for the remainder of the flight." Zara couldn't believe what she was hearing. Instead of investigating the situation, the co-pilot was effectively isolating them. The injustice of being punished for Victoria's behavior was staggering. "We'll be landing at Hartsfield-Jackson in approximately 40 minutes, the co-pilot continued. "Security personnel will meet the aircraft to address any ongoing concerns." As he returned to the cockpit, Victoria shot them a triumphant look. The message was clear. She had the full backing of the flight crew, and consequences awaited them in Atlanta. The final approach into Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was silent and tense. Zara and Marcus sat rigidly in their seats, acutely aware of the stares from surrounding passengers. Some offered sympathetic glances. Others seemed to have accepted Victoria's portrayal of them as troublemakers. As the aircraft taxied to the gate, the usual shuffling and preparation for deplaning was interrupted by an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with seatbelts fastened. We need to allow security personnel to board before anyone exits the aircraft." Zara's stomach dropped. Through the windows, she could see two airport security officers waiting at the jet bridge. Victoria moved to the front of the cabin, whispering urgently to the lead flight attendant while gesturing toward their seats. "Marcus," Zara whispered. "They're here for us." He nodded grimly. "Stay calm. We have evidence. We've done nothing wrong." The cabin door opened, and the security officers boarded, scanning the cabin before Victoria pointed directly at Marcus and Zara. The officers approached with hands resting near their tasers. "Sir, ma'am, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us immediately," the taller officer stated loudly. "May I ask why we're being detained?" Marcus asked. "We've received a security report about threatening behavior toward crew members," the officer replied. "Please comply immediately to avoid further complications." With no choice, they collected their carry-ons. As they were escorted toward the exit, Zara caught Victoria's expression, a smirk of satisfaction that made her blood boil. The entire first-class cabin watched in silence as they were paraded out like criminals. The humiliation continued as they were marched through the busy terminal, flanked by security officers, while curious travelers stared and whispered. They were led to a small, windowless room marked Airport Security and directed to sit at a metal table. "Your IDs and phones, please," the female officer demanded. "Our grandmother is currently on her deathbed in Atlanta Memorial Hospital," Zara explained urgently. "We need to call our family to let them know we're delayed." "You can make calls after we process this security incident," the male officer replied without sympathy. "How long will that take?" Marcus asked. "This is literally a matter of life and death for our family." "That depends on how cooperative you are," came the cold response. For the next hour, they were interrogated separately about their threatening behavior toward the flight crew. Every explanation they offered was met with skepticism. "The flight attendant says you repeatedly refuse to follow safety instructions," the officer told Marcus. "That's completely false," he responded. "We have video evidence showing she was targeting us from the moment we boarded." "Convenient that you were recording," the officer replied suspiciously, almost like you were looking for trouble. Meanwhile, Zara was facing similar accusations in another room. "Ms. Johnson, Victoria Winters has been flying for 15 years without a single passenger complaint. Yet you're suggesting she suddenly decided to harass you for no reason?" "Not for no reason," Zara replied firmly. "The reason is the color of our skin." The officer's expression hardened. "That's a very serious accusation." "Yes, it is, Zara. Agreed. And we have evidence to prove it. 3 hours into their detention, a surprising development occurred. The security supervisor entered the room where Marcus was being questioned, accompanied by a familiar face, Richard Wong, the business passenger who had witnessed everything. I've reviewed the statements provided by this gentleman and several other passengers, the supervisor said, looking uncomfortable. We also have multiple video recordings that contradict the flight attendant's report. Richard Wong stepped forward. I canceled my connecting flight to provide a witness statement. What happened on that plane was textbook discrimination, and I couldn't in good conscience continue my journey while these people were being unjustly detained. The supervisor reluctantly admitted, it appears there may have been some misrepresentation in the initial security report. When Zara and Marcus were finally reunited and their phones returned, the devastating news awaited them. 5 missed calls from their cousin Layla, and a final text message. Grandma passed 20 minutes ago. Where are you? They had missed their grandmother's final moments, the chance to say goodbye, to hold her hand as she departed this world. All because of one flight attendant's racism and a system too ready to believe the worst about them based solely on their appearance. As they were escorted out of the security area, now with apologies instead of accusations, Zara checked the time on her phone. 3 hours and 22 minutes. That's how long the system had stolen from them. Time that could never be returned. Moments with their grandmother that were now lost forever. Have you ever experienced that gut-wrenching moment when injustice collides with personal tragedy? If you've ever had to battle discrimination while also dealing with grief, comment number 1 below to share your experience. If you believe companies should be held accountable when their employees discriminate, hit that like button right now. And if you want to see more stories of people standing up against systemic racism, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Now, what would you do if you were in Zara and Marcus's position? Would you let it go to focus on grieving, or would you fight back against the system that wronged you? The following day was a blur of grief and anger. The Johnson siblings sat in their late grandmother's living room, surrounded by relatives, the funeral arrangements underway. Zara stared blankly at the wall, replaying yesterday's events while relatives moved around them, offering condolences and comfort they couldn't fully receive. We should have been there, Zara whispered to Marcus as they sat slightly apart from the others. She waited for us. Marcus nodded, his expression haunted. Then, with sudden determination, he pulled out his phone. I'm not letting this go, not just for us, but for everyone who's been treated this way and stayed silent because they felt powerless. What can we possibly do? Zara asked, exhaustion evident in her voice. Remember James Thompson from law school? Marcus said. He specializes in civil rights cases now. Works for Thompson and Williams in D.C. Zara straightened slightly, the first spark of something besides grief lighting her eyes. The discrimination attorney? The one who won that massive case against the police department in Baltimore? The same, Marcus confirmed, already dialing. I've kept in touch. He's been wanting a solid case against the airlines for years. He handed Zara the phone, and she took it with trembling fingers. The number rang 3 times before a receptionist answered. Thompson and Williams law firm. Later that evening, after a 2-hour call with Thompson, the siblings sat at their grandmother's kitchen table with a new sense of purpose. The attorney's words had ignited something in them both. What happened to you isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern, and patterns can be proven in court. He thinks we have a strong case, Marcus explained to their cousin Layla, who had joined them, especially with the video evidence and witness statements. Thompson's already reached out to other passengers, Zara added. That businessman, Richard Wong, has agreed to provide a formal statement, and apparently 3 others have contacted the firm independently after witnessing what happened. Their phones chimed simultaneously, identical emails from SkyWest Airlines customer service. Dear valued customer, we regret any inconvenience experienced during your recent journey on Flight 1382. SkyWest Airlines is committed to providing excellent service to all passengers. As a gesture of goodwill, we're offering 2 complimentary flight vouchers for future travel. To maintain our focus on serving you better, We request this matter be considered resolved with this compensation. SkyWest Airlines Customer Relations. Marcus scoffed as he read the email aloud. Inconvenience? They're calling racist harassment and false detention an inconvenience? They want to buy our silence with flight vouchers, Zara said incredulously. As if we'd ever fly with them again. Layla looked between them. Are you sure you want to pursue this? It could get ugly. Before either could respond, Zara's phone rang. A local Atlanta number she didn't recognize. Hello? Ms. Johnson? This is Erica Washington from Atlanta Black Star News. We've received information about an incident on SkyWest Airlines yesterday involving you and your brother. Would you be willing to comment? Zara's eyes widened as she put the call on speaker. How did you get this information? We received an anonymous tip, including cell phone footage from another passenger showing a flight attendant making racist remarks. Is it true you were detained by airport security as a result of false allegations? While they were deciding how to respond to the media inquiry, Marcus received an email from an unfamiliar address. Mr. Johnson, you don't know me, but I work for SkyWest HR. What happened to you and your sister wasn't right. Victoria Winters has a history of similar complaints that have been buried by management. I'm risking my job sending this, but attached is her redacted personnel file showing 7 previous incidents with minority passengers. All were settled quietly with NDAs. A concerned employee. Thompson needs to see this immediately, Marcus said, forwarding the email. This proves they knew she was a problem. Within hours, Thompson had assembled a team to research the airline's history of discrimination complaints. What began as a personal fight for justice was rapidly expanding into something much larger. The next morning, Zara's marketing clients began calling one after another. The first was awkward, but direct. We've seen the news story about your incident, Zara. While we sympathize, we need to put our contract on hold until this blows over. We can't risk the association. By afternoon, 3 more clients had delivered similar messages. Their livelihood was now under attack. Then came the bombshell. Thompson called with news that left them speechless. We've received evidence that Victoria Winters has been involved in at least 6 similar incidents with minority passengers. Each time, she wasn't disciplined. She was simply transferred to a different route. This isn't just about one racist flight attendant. It's about an airline that enables and protects discriminatory behavior. As they processed this revelation, the full magnitude of what they were up against began to take shape. This wasn't just about seeking justice for themselves anymore. They had stumbled upon a systemic problem that affected countless travelers. But if an entire airline corporation was willing to protect racist employees, how far would they go to silence those who threatened to expose them? The SkyWest PR offensive began the following morning. A press release appeared on their website and was quickly picked up by major news outlets. SkyWest Airlines addresses disruptive passenger incident. SkyWest Airlines regrets that 2 passengers on Flight 1982 created a situation that compromised the comfortable travel experience we strive to provide all customers. Our highly trained crew members followed standard protocols when faced with escalating non-compliance and threatening behavior. The safety of our passengers and crew is our highest priority, and we stand behind our team members who work tirelessly to ensure that safety. We are cooperating fully with authorities and cannot comment further on this ongoing matter. Zara nearly choked on her coffee when she saw the statement. They're calling us disruptive and threatening? They're completely inverting what happened. Marcus, who had been on the phone with Thompson, hung up with a grim expression. It gets worse. Victoria Winters gave an exclusive interview to National Morning News. It's airing in 10 minutes. They watched in stunned silence as Victoria appeared on screen, eyes brimming with tears, a tissue clutched in her manicured hand. The chyron beneath her read, "Flight attendant speaks out, the untold story. I've never experienced anything like it in my 15 years of flying," Victoria said, her voice quavering. They became aggressive the moment they boarded, demanding special treatment, refusing standard safety instructions. The sympathetic interviewer nodded. "You felt threatened?" "Absolutely. Victoria continued. The male passenger is quite large and imposing. At one point, he stood up and blocked my path in the aisle. I genuinely feared for my safety. That never happened, Marcus shouted at the television. And when you see all these social media campaigns attacking me, Victoria dabbed at her eyes, calling me racist when I have many black friends and colleagues. It's devastating. My children are receiving threats. She doesn't even have children, Zara said incredulously, scrolling through the background check Thompson's team had provided. The interview concluded with Victoria positioned as the victim of a social media mob, with the interviewer emphasizing the importance of hearing both sides and not rushing to judgment. By midday, their social media accounts were flooded with hateful messages. Zara's professional LinkedIn profile received dozens of comments calling her race baiter and opportunist, while Marcus's hospital bio page was spammed with one-star reviews questioning his competence as a doctor. Marcus's phone rang, the hospital administrator's office. With a sinking feeling, he answered. Dr. Johnson, we need to discuss recent developments, Dr. Reynolds began without preamble. Several board members have expressed concerns about your judgment and temperament in light of the airline incident. My judgment? I was the victim of racial profiling, Marcus replied, struggling to keep his voice level. Be that as it may, we're a hospital that serves all communities. We can't afford to be associated with controversial situations that might make patients uncomfortable. The implication was clear. His career was now in jeopardy. Later that afternoon, as Zara walked to her car in the grocery store parking lot, she noticed a man quickly looking away when she spotted him. The same man had been behind her in the cereal aisle, and before that by the pharmacy counter. When she deliberately doubled back through the dairy section, he appeared again, pretending to examine yogurt containers. That evening, Marcus received a certified letter. Inside was a legal notice. Victoria Winters was filing for a restraining order against him, claiming he had made threatening statements and gestures during the flight and had incited online harassment against her. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. This is insane, Marcus said, pacing their grandmother's living room. She's the one who assaulted Zara with the beverage cart. She's the one who destroyed my laptop. She's the one who made explicitly racist comments caught on video. They're trying to discredit us before we can even file our lawsuit, Zara realized. They're turning everything around to make us look like the aggressors. As they discussed their next steps, a crash from the back of the house startled them. They rushed to the guest room where they were staying to find the window broken and glass scattered across the floor. Nothing seemed to be missing, but when they checked their luggage, the hard truth became apparent. Both their laptops were gone. The video, Zara gasped. My original recording was on that laptop. I backed it up to the cloud, Marcus assured her. Then his expression darkened. But all my research notes, patient data from my presentation, that wasn't backed up yet. They called the police, who took statements but seemed skeptical. Break-ins happen, the officer said with a shrug. Probably just kids looking for valuables to pawn. You sure nothing else is missing? Jewelry? Cash? The message was unmistakable. They were dealing with an opponent willing to fight dirty, with resources far beyond their own, and connections that potentially reached into law enforcement. The question remained, how far would SkyWest go to bury this case, and what would be their next move? Thompson's legal team didn't waste time. With their expertise in civil rights cases, they knew how to dig deeper than surface-level corporate statements. 2 weeks after the incident, Marcus and Zara sat in Thompson's temporary Atlanta office, reviewing what his team had uncovered. We've been researching SkyWest's corporate structure and discovered something concerning, Thompson explained, spreading documents across the conference table. Their head of human resources, Bradley Whitfield, maintains an anonymous profile on Heritage America, a white nationalist forum. You're kidding. Zara leaned forward to examine the evidence. We matched his IP address through court-authorized discovery in another case, Thompson continued. But here's where it gets interesting. Whitfield has exchanged private messages with HR directors at 3 other major airlines, all discussing what they call passenger quality control. Marcus's expression darkened. That sounds like a euphemism. Exactly, Thompson nodded. We've cross-referenced complaints filed with the Department of Transportation over the past 5 years. There's a clear pattern across multiple airlines of minority passengers being subjected to additional scrutiny, removed from flights, or having issues with specific crew members. And the handling of these incidents follows an identical protocol, each time. They're coordinating their discrimination? Zara asked incredulously. It appears so, and we've uncovered another connection. Victoria Winters isn't just a random flight attendant. Her brother is Charles Winters, Executive Vice President at Global Air Partners, the parent company that owns SkyWest, Marcus realized. And 3 other regional carriers, Thompson confirmed. Now we understand why she's been protected despite multiple incidents. She has family in high places. As Thompson continued explaining their findings, his assistant entered with a thick folder. This just came in from our source at SkyWest. You need to see it immediately. Inside was a document labeled Passenger Interaction Protocol, Special Circumstances. The protocol outlined specific steps for handling passenger quality incidents, including how to document encounters in ways that protected the airline, criteria for involving airport security, and methods to discourage certain passengers from selecting our airline in the future. This is corporate-sanctioned discrimination, Thompson said gravely. They've created a system to push certain travelers away while maintaining plausible deniability. Their investigation had also uncovered similar cases across the country. Thompson's team began contacting other victims, building a network of witnesses and plaintiffs who had experienced comparable treatment. Melissa Chen was removed from a SkyWest flight for suspicious behavior that turned out to be reading a book in Mandarin, Thompson's associate explained. DeAndre Washington was denied boarding because his identification seemed irregular, despite having a valid passport and ticket. As they were reviewing these cases, Thompson received a call from a former SkyWest flight attendant named Rebecca Damon. I left the airline 3 years ago because of their training practices, Rebecca explained when they met the following day. New flight attendants are taught to identify potential problem passengers using criteria that are basically racial profiling disguised as security protocols. Would you be willing to testify to this? Thompson asked. That's why I'm here, she confirmed. I have training materials, internal memos, everything. The case was growing stronger by the day. Thompson filed preliminary motions requesting preservation of evidence and depositions from key SkyWest executives. Then, one night, everything changed. Thompson called the siblings at 2 a.m., his voice tight with controlled anger. My office was broken into an hour ago. They knew exactly what they were looking for. All files related to your case have been taken, both physical and digital. My computer was specifically targeted. Was anything else stolen? Marcus asked. No, this wasn't a random burglary, and they left something behind. A note on my desk with both your names and the words "drop it or else." Whoever we're dealing with, they're not above threats and intimidation. The break-in was a turning point. What had begun as a single incident of discrimination on a flight had led them to uncover what appeared to be an industry-wide system of coordinated discrimination. Now, with threats targeting not just them, but also their legal representation, the stakes had escalated dramatically. We need to decide, Thompson said soberly. We can still walk away. I wouldn't blame you after these threats. Marcus and Zara exchanged a look, the same determination visible in both their expressions. Our grandmother taught us that injustice doesn't disappear when you look away, Zara said firmly. It just grows in the darkness. We're not backing down, Marcus agreed. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who's been silenced by this system. Thompson nodded, respect evident in his expression. Then let's take this fight to the courts. It's time to file our class action lawsuit. Would you have the courage to take on a powerful corporation after discovering they were part of a discrimination network? Comment number 1. If you believe in standing up against systemic racism, no matter the personal cost. If you think more people need to hear about how discrimination networks operate in major industries, hit that like button now. And make sure to subscribe if you want to follow more stories of everyday heroes fighting against injustice. Now, what do you think happens when ordinary people challenge powerful systems? Do the courts truly provide equal justice regardless of wealth and influence? The filing of Johnson et al. Via SkyWest Airlines made headlines across the country. The class action lawsuit named not only SkyWest, but also its parent company Global Air Partners, Victoria Winters, and 5 senior executives, including HR Director Bradley Whitfield. The complaint detailed the airline's pattern of discrimination, the coordinated passenger quality control system, and the retaliatory actions taken against the Johnsons. The media explosion was immediate and polarizing. Some outlets praised the siblings for their courage in challenging corporate discrimination, while others questioned their motives, suggesting they were seeking fame or an undeserved payday. Social media became a battleground of hashtags. Stand with Johnsons competed with the boycott troublemaker passengers. Don't read the comments, Thompson advised during their preparation session for the initial hearing. Focus on the facts, not the noise. Their first court appearance was scheduled before Judge Eleanor Hargrove, a 20-year veteran of the federal bench with a reputation for strict adherence to procedural law. As they entered the imposing courthouse surrounded by supporters and protesters alike, Marcus noticed Zara studying the judge's background on her tablet. "Finding anything concerning?" he asked quietly. "She sits on the Aviation Law Committee," Zara replied, scrolling through the judge's biography. "And her husband played golf with the CEO of Global Air Partners at a charity event last year." "That doesn't necessarily indicate bias," Thompson reassured them, though his expression betrayed concern. Inside the courtroom, SkyWest's legal team occupied 2 full tables. 8 attorneys from Henderson and Blackwell, one of the country's most prestigious corporate law firms. Their lead counsel, Richard Bennett, was known for aggressive defense, strategies that often overwhelmed plaintiffs through procedural complexity. Judge Hargrove began the hearing with unexpected comments. "Before we address the motions before me, I must note my concerns about the broad scope of this complaint. The court questions whether the alleged incidents, even if proven, rise to the level of a class action." Thompson stood immediately. "Your Honor, we've documented over 200 similar incidents across SkyWest's network, all following the same discriminatory pattern outlined in their own internal protocols." "Alleged protocols, Mr. Thompson," Judge Hargrove corrected, and 200 individual consumer complaints do not necessarily constitute a pattern of civil rights violations. They may simply reflect individual service failures. Bennett rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss this complaint on multiple grounds. First, the plaintiffs failed to exhaust administrative remedies through the Department of Transportation. Second, the alleged harm lacks specificity and measurability. Third, the class certification fails to meet the commonality requirements under Rule 23. For the next hour, Bennett presented a masterclass in procedural obstruction, raising technicality. After technicality, Thompson countered each argument effectively, but it became clear Judge Hargrove was receptive to SkyWest's position. "The court is inclined to grant the motion to dismiss," she finally stated, "unless plaintiffs can provide more compelling evidence of a coordinated discriminatory policy rather than isolated incidents." "Your Honor," Thompson responded urgently, "we have internal documents demonstrating exactly such a policy. We request limited discovery to present this evidence properly." After tense deliberation, Judge Hargrove reluctantly granted a narrower discovery period of 30 days, far less than the 6 months Thompson had requested. As they left the courtroom, Bennett approached them in the hallway. "Mr. Thompson, a word." He guided them to a private alcove, his expression superficially cordial. "My clients are prepared to offer a settlement, $3 million, divided among all plaintiffs, with standard non-disclosure agreements." $3 million for over 200 plaintiffs? Thompson scoffed. "That's insulting." "It's generous considering Judge Hargrove's clear inclination to dismiss," Bennett countered. "And the NDAs would protect my clients from reputational damage while compensating your clients for any discomfort they experienced." Marcus stepped forward. "This isn't about discomfort or money. It's about changing a discriminatory system." Bennett's cordial mask slipped slightly. "Admirable idealism, Dr. Johnson. However, I should mention that prolonged litigation tends to have unforeseen consequences. Professional consequences, personal consequences. The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. "We'll see you in court, Mr. Bennett," Thompson replied firmly. Back at Thompson's office, the team regrouped to assess their position. "Judge Hargrove's connections to the aviation industry are concerning," Thompson admitted. "We need to adjust our strategy. Instead of focusing broadly on all discriminatory incidents, we should highlight the pattern of behavior, how the airline handled each incident identically, following their secret protocol." As they were developing this approach, a clerk from Judge Hargrove's office called. "Judge Hargrove has recused herself from Johnson versus SkyWest," she informed them. "The case will be reassigned." "May I ask the reason for the recusal?" Thompson inquired. "The judge has determined that her impartiality might reasonably be questioned due to her husband's business relationship with Henderson and Blackwell, which represents the defendants." After the call, Thompson explained to the siblings, "Our research team discovered that Judge Hargrove's husband is a senior partner at a consulting firm that shares 3 major clients with SkyWest's law firm. We filed a motion highlighting this conflict yesterday." For the first time since filing the lawsuit, Marcus and Zara shared a moment of cautious optimism. The system hadn't completely failed them, at least not yet. But the road ahead remained daunting, and their opponents had already demonstrated their willingness to fight dirty. "Who will be our new judge?" Zara asked. "We'll find out tomorrow," Thompson replied. "But regardless of who it is, we've cleared our first major hurdle. Now we need to use our limited discovery time to build an irrefutable case about this discrimination network." As they left Thompson's office that evening, the weight of what they were undertaking felt both heavier and somewhat lighter. The legal battle had only just begun, but they had already exposed one key truth: the system of discrimination. They were fighting extended further than they had initially realized, reaching into the very courts designed to provide justice. The case was reassigned to Judge Raymond Chen, a recently appointed federal judge with a background in civil rights law. With the 30-day discovery period rapidly passing, Thompson's team worked around the clock to compile evidence that would withstand the inevitable motion to dismiss. "We need to focus on documentation that proves the pattern," Thompson explained during their strategy session. "Individual testimonies are powerful, but patterns demonstrated through data are irrefutable." The team had already gathered statements from over 200 passengers who had experienced similar discrimination on SkyWest flights. Each account followed a disturbing pattern: initial targeting based on race or ethnicity, escalation by crew members, security involvement, and subsequent dismissal of complaints through nearly identical corporate responses. "What's remarkable is the consistency," Thompson's data analyst explained, presenting a series of charts. "Look at these complaint responses over a 5-year period. Despite being handled by supposedly different customer service representatives, they contain identical phrasing and resolution offers." Marcus leaned forward, studying the analysis. "They're using the same template for dismissing discrimination complaints." "Exactly," Thompson agreed. "But we've found something even more compelling. Our analysis of SkyWest's own flight records shows a statistically significant pattern of random security checks, disproportionately targeting passengers with names commonly associated with minority backgrounds. The data was damning. Passengers with names like Rodriguez, Washington, Khan, or Chen were 15 times more likely to be subject to additional security measures than those with names like Smith or Johnson." Further research revealed that these discriminatory practices actually cost the airline millions in operational expenses. The frequent reseating and flight removals created logistical challenges, delayed departures, and required additional personnel hours, all expenses the airline apparently considered worthwhile to maintain their discriminatory system. "They're literally paying to discriminate," Zara observed incredulously. "It's not even economically rational." A breakthrough came when Thompson's team obtained minutes from a SkyWest board meeting through a company whistleblower. The document revealed that executives had been made aware of discrimination concerns, but had explicitly decided against overcorrection that might alter the customer experience for our core demographic. "They knew," Marcus said quietly, reading the highlighted section. They knew, and they chose to continue. The investigation into Victoria Winters' background yielded another critical piece of evidence. Before becoming a flight attendant, she had participated in a controversial pilot program called Passenger Demographic Management at Global Air Partners training facility. The program was officially discontinued after public criticism, Thompson explained, but our sources indicate the practices were simply incorporated into standard training under different terminology. Phone records subpoenaed during discovery proved Victoria had contacted airport security before the plane landed in Atlanta, contradicting her claim that security had been called due to in-flight behavior. The call had been placed during her brief visit to the cockpit, 40 minutes before landing. Perhaps most damning were the results of employee surveys that SkyWest had fought desperately to keep sealed. When asked about diversity concerns, numerous employees had reported witnessing or being instructed to engage in discriminatory practices. These concerns had been systematically categorized as non-actionable feedback and buried in HR files. As the discovery period neared its end, a final piece of evidence arrived anonymously at Thompson's office, a recording from an executive planning meeting where Global Air Partners leadership discussed strategies for demographic balancing to maintain the comfort level of our priority customers. "We don't want to explicitly discourage certain travelers," a voice identified as CEO William Stratton said in the recording. "We simply want to create an experience that leads them to self-select other airlines while maintaining legal deniability." The evidence painted a clear picture of a corporation that had deliberately implemented discriminatory policies while carefully constructing plausible deniability. When Judge Chen reviewed their findings during the follow-up hearing, his expression remained neutral, but his questions to SkyWest's attorneys grew increasingly pointed. "The court finds sufficient evidence to proceed to trial," he finally announced, denying SkyWest's motion to dismiss. "Furthermore, I am granting class certification based on the clear pattern of similar treatment documented in the evidence." It was their first major victory. The case would go forward, and the evidence they had uncovered would become public record. SkyWest could no longer hide behind procedural obstacles or confidential settlements. The truth would have its day in court. While the legal battle advanced through the court system, Marcus and Zara recognized that true change would require more than a favorable verdict. Corporate discrimination thrived in silence, and they were determined to break that silence. "We need to make this bigger than just our case," Zara explained during a meeting with Thompson's team. "My background is in marketing. I know how to build awareness campaigns." With Thompson's approval, they launched Fly Fair, a public awareness initiative focused on documenting and exposing discrimination in air travel. Their website invited travelers to share their experiences and provided resources for reporting incidents to both airlines and regulatory agencies. The response was overwhelming. Within weeks, thousands of people had submitted accounts of discriminatory treatment across multiple airlines. The stories followed disturbing patterns. Middle Eastern passengers subjected to additional random screenings. Black travelers questioned about their first-class tickets. Asian Americans asked to move seats to accommodate white passengers' preferences. "What we're seeing isn't isolated," Marcus explained during a television interview. "It's systemic. These aren't accidental misunderstandings. They're the result of deliberate policies designed to make certain passengers feel unwelcome." As public awareness grew, so did corporate panic. SkyWest's stock dropped 17% in a single week as a consumer boycott gained momentum. Other airlines, fearing similar exposure, hastily announced diversity initiatives and enhanced non-discrimination training. SkyWest's response turned increasingly desperate. They hired Pinnacle Crisis Management, a firm notorious for aggressive reputation defense tactics. Almost immediately, articles began appearing questioning the Johnsons' motives and character. Sources close to Marcus Johnson reveal concerns about his medical judgment, read one particularly vicious piece in a conservative publication. Hospital colleagues report erratic behavior and questionable patient interactions. The attacks extended beyond media smears. One evening, while their parents were visiting from Chicago, a group of concerned citizens gathered outside their home, holding signs accusing the family of attacking American businesses for profit. "Mom and Dad shouldn't have to deal with this," Zara said, watching through the blinds as police finally dispersed the protesters. "They're being targeted because of us." Marcus's professional struggles intensified when he received an anonymous email threatening to report him to the medical board for providing substandard care based on political agendas. Though baseless, such a complaint would trigger an investigation that could derail his career. Despite these intimidation tactics, public support continued to grow. Civil rights organizations rallied behind them, transportation oversight committees began reviewing airline practices, and social media amplified their message beyond what traditional media would cover. The turning point came when Congressman James Lewis, chair of the House Transportation Committee, invited the Johnsons to testify about their experience and the broader pattern of discrimination they had uncovered. "This is our chance to create systemic change," Thompson told them. "Congressional testimony means federal regulatory attention, something airlines fear far more than lawsuits." The night before the scheduled testimony, Zara drove home from a preparatory meeting with Thompson. Focused on her talking points for the next day, she didn't immediately notice that her car was handling strangely. When she pressed the brakes at a red light, the pedal went straight to the floor. Her marketing instincts saved her life. A recent campaign for a defensive driving course had emphasized what to do in brake failure. She managed to downshift, use the emergency brake, and guide the car into a roadside ditch without hitting other vehicles. The police investigation was unequivocal. Someone had cut the brake line. This wasn't a warning or intimidation tactic. It was an attempt on her life. From her hospital bed, with a broken arm and concussion, Zara made one thing clear to Marcus and Thompson. "I still want to testify. If they're willing to go this far to silence us, imagine what they've done to people without our resources and platform." With Zara hospitalized, Marcus would need to testify alone while his sister watched remotely. As he prepared to face not only the congressional committee but also the corporations that had shown they would stop at nothing to protect their discriminatory practices, the stakes couldn't have been higher. The Capitol hearing room buzzed with tension. News cameras lined the back wall and every seat in the public gallery was filled. Marcus sat alone at the witness table, his posture straight despite his exhaustion. On the tablet before him, Zara watched from her hospital room, connected via secure video link. "This hearing of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee will come to order," Congressman Lewis announced, gaveling the session to begin. "Today we examine reports of discriminatory practices in the commercial airline industry, specifically allegations of systemic bias in passenger treatment." Marcus delivered his opening statement with the same calm precision he used when presenting medical research. He methodically outlined their experience, the evidence they had uncovered, and the broader pattern of discrimination their investigation had revealed. "This isn't about one bad flight attendant or one unpleasant experience," he explained. "Our investigation has uncovered evidence of coordinated efforts across multiple airlines to discourage minority passengers through differential treatment, selective enforcement of policies, and targeted security interventions." The committee members' questions ranged from sympathetic to skeptical, with partisan divisions quickly emerging. Some focused on the evidence of systematic discrimination, while others suggested the Johnsons were exaggerating isolated incidents for financial gain. "Dr. Johnson," one representative asked pointedly, "isn't it possible that what you perceived as racial animus was simply a misunderstanding about airline procedures?" "With respect, Congressman," Marcus replied, "when a flight attendant tells American citizens to go back where you people came from, there's little room for misinterpretation." Midway through the testimony, Victoria Winters entered with her legal team and took seats in the second row. Her presence was clearly meant to intimidate, but Marcus continued without acknowledging her. When Victoria was called to testify, she presented herself as a dedicated professional, unfairly targeted by passengers with an agenda. Her expensive legal team had prepared her thoroughly, and she deflected most questions with practiced responses about following standard security protocols and ensuring passenger safety. The hearing's dynamic shifted dramatically when Thompson approached the committee chair and requested permission to present newly discovered evidence. After a brief consultation, Congressman Lewis agreed. "Committee members, we've recently obtained documentation of an algorithmic system used by SkyWest and other global air partners airlines," Thompson explained, distributing folders. This system automatically flags passengers as potentially difficult, based primarily on name patterns associated with specific ethnic backgrounds. The revelation caused immediate uproar. Victoria's composure visibly faltered as Thompson continued. This algorithm, which the airlines have named Customer Compatibility Assessment, assigns risk scores to passengers before they even board. Those with high scores are flagged for additional scrutiny, reduced service levels, and in some cases, preemptive security intervention. Congressman Lewis turned to Victoria. Ms. Winters, were you aware of this passenger scoring system? She hesitated, clearly calculating her response. I was aware of passenger management protocols, but not specific algorithms. Yet our evidence indicates you accessed the Johnson siblings' compatibility scores before they boarded your flight, Thompson countered, presenting screen captures of the airline's internal system. In fact, you accessed their profiles 3 times before Flight 1382 departed. Victoria's carefully constructed facade began to crumble under increasingly direct questioning. When confronted with evidence that she had specifically requested to work flights to Atlanta, a route with high numbers of black passengers, despite it being less desirable for seniority-based scheduling, she struggled to provide a plausible explanation. The breaking point came when Congressman Lewis asked directly about her connection to the airline's executive leadership through her brother. Did you discuss passenger profiling procedures with your brother, Charles Winters, Executive Vice President at Global Air Partners? We discuss work generally, she stammered. Charles explained that certain passengers fit profiles that could impact the comfort of our primary customer demographic. And what demographic would that be? Lewis pressed. The executives called them premium passengers, Victoria responded, then fatally added, they directed us to ensure these passengers weren't subjected to discomfort from demographic shifts in our customer base. The admission sent shockwaves through the hearing room. Victoria had just confirmed under oath that airline executives had directed discriminatory treatment. As the hearing continued, public opinion shifted dramatically. Thousands of viewers, watching the live broadcast, expressed outrage at the exposed discrimination. SkyWest stock plummeted another 23% before trading was temporarily halted. For Marcus, watching Victoria's testimony crumble under the weight of truth provided a measure of vindication. But the true victory wasn't personal. It was the public exposure of a system that had harmed countless travelers who lacked the resources to fight back. As the hearing concluded, Congressman Lewis announced that the committee would be launching a formal investigation into discriminatory practices across the entire airline industry, with potential regulatory reforms to follow. When Marcus finally returned to Zara's hospital room that evening, they watched the news coverage together in grateful silence. After weeks of being vilified, threatened, and attacked, the truth had finally broken through. Grandma would be proud, Zara said quietly. Marcus nodded. This is just the beginning. 18 months after Flight 1382, Marcus and Zara stood together at a podium in the Department of Transportation's Conference Center in Washington, D.C. Behind them, Transportation Secretary Janet Rivera prepared to announce the most significant overhaul of airline passenger rights in decades. The Johnson case had ultimately settled for a historic amount, $142 million divided among the class of affected passengers. More importantly, the settlement included binding commitments to transform industry practices. Today marks the implementation of the Fair Skies Initiative, Secretary Rivera announced. These new regulations require airlines to document and report all passenger removals, security interventions, and service denials, with quarterly diversity audits to identify potential discrimination patterns. The journey to this moment had been arduous. The settlement negotiations alone had taken 6 months, with SkyWest initially refusing any non-monetary remedies. Only when faced with the prospect of a public trial and the complete exposure of their internal documents did they finally agree to systemic changes. Victoria Winters had faced her own reckoning. During preparation for trial, evidence emerged that she had deliberately destroyed passenger complaints and tampered with records to conceal her discrimination pattern. These actions, combined with her misleading congressional testimony, resulted in perjury charges that were still working their way through the courts. The executive suite at Global Air Partners had undergone a complete restructuring. CEO William Stratton resigned amid the scandal, along with 6 other senior executives implicated in designing or implementing the discriminatory policies. The board of directors, under intense shareholder pressure, appointed aviation's first black woman, CEO with a mandate to transform the corporate culture. For Marcus and Zara personally, recovery had been complicated. Marcus had ultimately left Chicago Memorial Hospital after continuing tensions with administration, but had found a more supportive position at Atlanta University Medical Center, where he now led a research initiative on healthcare disparities. Zara had rebuilt her marketing consultancy with a new focus on helping civil rights organizations develop effective communication strategies. Together, they had established the Elaine Johnson Scholarship Foundation, named for their grandmother, providing educational support for minority students pursuing careers in aviation. The foundation's mission, to transform the industry from within by changing who had access to its highest levels, represented the kind of structural approach to discrimination their grandmother had always advocated. Systems don't change through single victories, she used to tell them. They change when you rewrite the rules and open the doors. The most profound impact, however, had extended far beyond aviation. The evidence-gathering techniques and legal strategies developed for their case became templates for identifying discrimination networks in other industries. Law firms across the country had adopted similar data-focused approaches to uncover bias in housing, banking, and healthcare systems. 1 year after the settlement, Marcus and Zara boarded a SkyWest flight to Chicago, their first time flying the airline since the incident. The diverse flight crew treated them with the same professional courtesy extended to all passengers. No extra scrutiny, no questioning of their first-class tickets, no subtle signals of unwelcome. At the ceremony unveiling the new federal airline, guidance, Secretary Rivera invited them to the stage one final time. The Johnson siblings didn't just win a lawsuit, she told the assembled officials and media. They transformed an industry and inspired a new approach to combating discrimination nationwide. As the audience applauded, Rivera had one final surprise. "We recently discovered a voicemail that your grandmother left for you, Marcus, the day she passed away. Her hospital nurse saved it thinking you might want to hear her final words. With your permission, I'd like to play it." Surprised and emotional, the siblings nodded their consent. Elaine Johnson's voice, weak but determined, filled the room. "Marcus, honey, I don't think I'll be here when you arrive. Don't be sad. I've had a good life. Remember what I always taught you both. When you see others treated wrong, you stand up. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who'll come after you. That's how change happens. I love you both. Make it count." As the recording ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. What had begun with discrimination on a single flight had catalyzed transformation across multiple industries. The siblings had taken their grandmother's final advice and truly made it count, not just for themselves, but for countless others, who would never face the same discrimination because of their courage to stand up and fight back. The story of Zara and Marcus Johnson teaches us powerful lessons about confronting discrimination in modern America. First, it shows that racism doesn't just manifest in overt slurs or violence. It often operates through sophisticated systems designed to maintain plausible deniability. These discriminatory networks can span entire industries, protected by corporate structures and policies that make individual incidents seem isolated rather than systemic. Second, the Johnsons' journey demonstrates that challenging these systems requires more than personal courage. It demands evidence, strategy, and collective action. By documenting their experience, gathering data, and connecting with others who'd faced similar treatment, they transformed a personal injustice into a movement for structural change. Third, the story illustrates how privilege and power work to protect discriminatory systems. When threatened, these systems don't just deny wrongdoing, they actively attack those who expose them, attempting to discredit, intimidate, and silence through sophisticated counter-campaigns. Perhaps most importantly, the Johnsons remind us that meaningful change often requires sacrifice. They risked their careers, safety, and reputations because they understood their grandmother's wisdom. When you see others treated wrong, you stand up. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who'll come after you. Their story offers hope that determined individuals, armed with truth and unwilling to be silenced, can indeed transform entrenched systems of discrimination, not through a single victory, but by inspiring new approaches that rewrite rules and open doors for generations to come. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination and felt powerless to challenge it? Comment below with your story or thoughts on how we can better support those fighting against systemic racism. If you believe in the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage and justice. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how discrimination works in subtle systemic ways. Awareness is the first step toward change. Thank you for joining us on this journey of truth and transformation. Remember, as Elaine Johnson said, that's how change happens. One person standing up, then another, until together we create the world we wish to see.